Timothy Goes to School was a fairly well-known children's cartoon based on a book series. Centered around the day-to-day life of the titular Timothy, a young raccoon inhabiting a world of anthropomorphic animals who go to school with him to learn various lessons about social skills and humility. Beyond those two things, the show wasn't anything remarkable, and it was very much geared towards a younger audience of an early age demographic. And with such a light and innocent show, there was bound to be some sort of urban legend or creepypasta to be found. And I was fortunate enough to catch a glimpse of one such legend. What I'd witnessed was a story called Timothy's Bad Week, and it was provided by YouTube. Like many things on the internet these days, I assumed that it was a fan-made creepypasta or a trolling attempt. And either way, I decided to let my morbid curiosity get the better of me. So I sat back in my chair to watch what horror some crazy guy on the internet had inserted into one of my childhood shows that I watched when I was 2. When I put the video on, I expected a YouTube poop kind of thing. And sure enough, the video played in black and white with poor image quality that made the characters seem like they were shifting in and out of themselves. But I noticed they left the theme tune and the opening sequence otherwise untouched. Following the intro, the video cut to black and text read Monday, before opening to an empty street with Timothy dressed for school, waiting at the bus stop. Animation as bad as ever, and all done in black and white. The bus pulled over and Timothy got on. All the other characters were on the bus, but they acted a bit differently. Yoko the cat seemed to be angry, the two Franks were fighting each other, and no one seemed to bother despite their brawl being quite physical. Next to the Franks sat Doris the beaver, always depicted as a bit of a tomboy. She was much larger than usual in this, to the point of looking morbidly obese, and she kept crying as Fritz the badger and Claude the raccoon taunted her repeatedly from a nearby seat. Timothy went to sit by a window and glanced over at Nora the mouse, who was holding hands with Charles, another mouse, the pair staring out in front of themselves as if trying to block out the rest of the world. Finally, at the very back of the bus sat Lily the fox, having only one shoe and looking rather upset, one of her arms having a noticeable bruise. The scene went black, and text read Tuesday. Same as the first time. Timothy waiting for the bus, but this time, his clothing seemed a little dirty and torn as the bus pulled up and he climbed on board. Yoko seemed angrier than before. The two Franks were covered in cuts and bruises as they kept looking over at each other from either side of the bus, as if ready to fight again at any moment. Doris was cowering in her seat as Fritz and Claude took to pelting her with spitballs, no one seeming to notice or care. Timothy once again sat by a window and he glanced over at Nora and Charles. The two mice were now huddled together as if frightened, still staring in front of themselves, ears pinned back. At the very back of the bus, Lily was now covered in bruises and she was completely barefoot, also with a small cut visible in her right ear. The scene once again went black and text read Wednesday. At this point I was getting bored of it, but I could have taken it or left it. Same as the first two times. Timothy waiting for the bus, but this time his clothing was very dirty and torn. His fur also began to look unkempt as the bus pulled up and he climbed on board. Yoko was now flexing her claws quite literally, and she was scratching at the back of the seat in front of her in anger. The two Franks were still covered in cuts and bruises, though one of them now sported a cast in their arm as the other glared with the other with a look of pure hate. Doris was sobbing and she was begging Fritz and Claude to leave her alone as they taunted her, tossing donuts at her this time that they smuggled onto the bus in a small box. Timothy, per usual, sat by a window and he glanced over at Nora and Charles. Only this time, Nora was by herself, looking very unwell, as she continually looked over the empty space that Charles had only been in a day earlier. At the very back of the bus, Lily was nowhere to be seen. The scene cut to black, and the text read, Thursday. Same thing as before. Timothy waiting for the bus. This time, his clothing was practically falling off, and his fur looked like that it was extremely unkempt and dirty. Once again, the bus pulled over and Timothy got on. Yoko was nowhere to be seen. The two Franks were now down to one, who was covered from head to toe in vicious-looking scars as he trembled uncontrollably. Doris was gone, and Fritz and Claude sat quietly, with their heads down in a deep sense of shame. Timothy, as he always did, sat by a window and he glanced over at the empty chair Nora had occupied the other day. When he noticed that she was gone, he turned to Fritz and Claude for the first time, and the pair once again had their heads down, as if to avoid his stare. He decided to sit back down, and he looked at the back of the bus where he saw a face he hadn't seen in 3 days. Grace the cat. For the very last time, the scene cut to black, and the text read, Friday. Same thing as always has been. Timothy waiting for the bus. This time, he was on crutches. He hobbled onto the bus with a look of anger. The bus was completely empty except for Grace, who was at the very back of the bus. Timothy, swallowing his pride and anger, hobbled over to her and grunted in pain as he sat down next to her. She put her paw in his paw, looked at him, and said, Welcome home, Timothy. Everything faded to black as the song Kookaburra Sits in the Old Gum Tree played. The video then cut off. I didn't have much of an opinion on it when I first saw it. I mean, by creepypasta standards, I'd say it's far from the best, but I got a kick out of it. And I decided to save it onto my PC, onto my desktop, and just download it. So that was fun. Actually, by the time I'm writing this, I might decide to open up for a laugh. Hope I don't get a virus.